I think what the very tragic outcome of Renee Good's death, that woman who was murdered by ICE the other day, is that people have seen, like, look, you are fair game, period. If you believe in resisting this administration's violence, you are fair game. And that is bone chilling. It is scary to think that that's the country we live in.
Welcome to Uptown Voices. From Harlem to the Heights to the northern tip of Inwood, we're here to celebrate our people and together seek solutions for the difficult issues we're all confronting as neighbors. Regardless of what hood you represent, we share the same goal, creating the best community we can, somewhere to enjoy, where we can build our lives and raise our children. We want to thank 181 Cabrini, located on the corner of 181st Street and Cabrini Boulevard, for its generous support for. I'm here with my brother from another mother, Led Black, and this is another episode of Uptown Voices. We've got an amazing guest, Amanda Septimo. She is a state assembly member representing District 84, South Bronx, and she is also a candidate running for Congress against Congressman Richie Torres. This episode was recorded on Wednesday, January 14th. On Friday, January 16th, Amanda Septimo announced that she was suspending her campaign for Congress due to health issues. She, however, will continue to serve out her term. So we're really glad to have you here, Led Black. I want to just, before we toss it to Amanda, how you doing, Led? What's new with you?
I'm doing good, my brother. I'm super excited about today, and I wanted to remind everyone to make sure to subscribe, show us that Uptown love that we show y'all every day, day in, day out. So, But, let's get to it. I want to say, I don't think it's very hard to find someone more vile than Richie Tel Aviv Torres. I think this is a disrespect to New York City, disrespect to the BX. Like we have to get rid of him, right? He has to be. I don't want to see Richie Torres. I don't even know if Richie Torres is a real person. I think he's like some new form of like human AI that is just put in just Israel. I must do for Israel. Like I hate Richie Torres so much, and I think defeating him is just of the utmost importance. Why are you the person to do that? Tell us what about your origin story makes you the person to do that?
Well, honestly, it's really because it's not about Richie Torres for me at all, actually. I'm born and raised in the Bronx. The Bronx is my heart. There's many places I live in the world, but there's one place I'm always willing to throw down for, and that's the Bronx. And, being from the Bronx, you have like an experience growing up where people are always trying to play us, right? Like people are always saying like, oh, the Bronx is this, the Bronx is that. But really the Bronx is a land of like incredible community. We have community, I swear, like no other place. Everybody thinks their hometown is the best, but really the Bronx actually is. The reason that I'm running is because we deserve federal representation that recognizes that and that fights for it and that defends it. And right now we have a congressman in Richie Torres who fights way more for people across the world than he does for people here. And that is at the core of why I'm stepping up to run. And so I tell people often, like, yeah, I'm running against Richie Torres by happenstance because he's the congressman. But what I'm actually running for is the Bronx. I'm running for the Bronx to have the representation that we deserve, especially in this moment where everything in our country is so dark. And we really are like, it's not an exaggeration, even though there's a lot of exaggeration in politics. It's not an exaggeration in this moment to say we're fighting for the heart and soul and the future of our country. Communities like ours are the ones that suffer when we're not putting up enough of a fight. And that's what's happening right now with our federal representation.
I think that's 100% correct. And I also feel like, I know what you're saying is not about Richie Torres, but I think Richie Torres is emblematic of something that's wrong with our party, right? And I think he's a big example. I think that he has to be defeating. But you're right. The answer is going transcending Richie Torres, but really being a fighter for the people. And I think what you said was just on point. And thank you so much.
No, but you're right. I also agree with you that like there is a really big issue with our party. And recognizing that like we also need representatives who feel the pressure to be responsive to the people that put them in office. And for whatever reason, the way it's happening for Richie Torres, that's not how it's adding up. He's feeling pressure and is responsive to all kinds of other people, but not to the people that elected him. And that is something that I see across the party and that I think is an issue across the country.
Yeah, I think it's so important that our politicians represent the people in their districts and where they live, and I think we've gotten a little bit away from that, or a lot away from that in the party. I think it's so important that the people who we elect are actually the people that are representing our interests. And of course, that's going to drive the electorate away even more. Already we have an electorate that feels confused by all the different people who are in leadership positions. They're already feeling disenchanted. So I want to get a little nerdy here right
Please.
off the top, because I want us to sort of talk about your jurisdiction right now as an assembly member. New York especially is a complex puzzle. So I just want to understand, like, right now as an assembly member, where does your office fit into that puzzle? What are your limitations there, and what are the places where you can actually make a change, and where have you made the changes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I serve on the state level, right? And in like the plainest of terms, I tell people we're like essentially Congress for the state, where the governor is our president, and we sort of act as a co-equal branch and have to set policy accordingly. We on the state level get to focus on what I think are more of like the meat and potatoes. Whereas when you're thinking about like the city council, that is where you see representation around direct services. So like how often your trash gets picked up, how much money is going to be in a particular school in the district, whether that school will have a soccer program or not, those kinds of ins and outs. NYPD, right? Governing the police. But the state level is really where you get to set policy. So when I say policy, I mean education policy on how many kids can be in a classroom. So to say across the state, this is the maximum. The localities decide how much money will go to each school, but we spend billions of dollars on schools, and then they sort of decide how to divvy it out on the local level. We also get to set tax policy, which is something that's really important right now, housing policy. There's any number of ways that the different layers of government interact. We get to sort of, I frame it as like set the big picture goals, and the local government, the city government goes out and sort of achieves those goals. So, example that you hear a lot about in the news right now is childcare. Universal childcare is something that we want to see happen in New York. The governor has just said she's going to get behind it. That will be on the state level. That just means we're going to fund the program, and we will give the money to localities to work on the details of how to bring it to life. And so what I've been able to accomplish over these 5 years serving on the state level, I've been really proud of, because the single-handedly most important piece of legislation that we pass every year is our budget, which was $252 billion last year, bigger than many countries in the world, right? And so resources can make or break a community, right? And what's happened to the Bronx over the last few decades is that we haven't had the resources we need. And we've been shortchanged, and we bear the costs of that. So I've been able to lead hundreds of millions of dollars in a direct investment into the borough. So like through the Hunts Point meat markets, which are like thousands of jobs, and the produce markets, which are thousands of jobs. And now we'll expand to create a few thousand more, and they're unionized, and they're mostly Bronx people, and like that kind of direct investment. But also on a complete other side, this year for the first time ever, which I'm really proud of, we were able to. I started a coalition called Latinos United for Change, which is a statewide coalition of Latino-led and serving institutions that came together to fight for the first time ever direct funding for the Latino community in New York's budget. That was a huge, huge, huge fight and a huge effort, but desperately needed. And so some of the things we can't do that sort of are pulling me to run on the federal level are connected to things like immigration. Issues that are like bona fide national issues, right? Like immigration is one. One contrast that we'll see is like we were able to decriminalize marijuana on the state level. We didn't just decriminalize, we legalized it on the federal level on a national scale. That's something that has to really happen nationally, because there are all kinds of issues that still exist with banking, et cetera, because it's still considered illegal on the federal level. Immigration is probably the biggest one that I think is our at the center of our focus right now. But there's all kinds of policy that, particularly banking, that is directly connected to like economic opportunity, that is governed by the federal government, and that I think makes enough of a difference where you need meaningful representation to move the ball forward.
I want to thank you for that answer because I didn't really, the way you explained between the city council and the assembly, like I had never really understood it so clearly, right? And
Sure,
thank you
thanks.
for that. My question is like, what led you to this life of public service? Because like I can see the dedication, I can see the intellect, right? You could
Thanks.
have been somewhere else making tons of money.
Yeah.
Why public service?
That's a good question that I get asked. And I think I always wish, how, I don't know if you guys remember, like back in 2016 when there was like that wave, the blue wave, people always had these really incredible stories like, I saw my rep do this and I got up to run, and I saw this and I threw my name in the ring. And I just don't have a story like that. The truth is that I grew up in Hunts Point, and growing up in a community that is so under resourced, and I went to school in Westchester. So literally every day I would leave Hunts Point, go to Westchester, see how the other half lives, and be like, damn, this is kind of crazy. Right? Like
Mm,
this doesn't make any sense. The school that I went to, if you guys ever been to Rye Playland, it's in the same town. And so just a completely different experience on a daily basis. And as I got older, I started kind of volunteering and stuff when I was like 11 at my local little community center. Then I started working with a local organization on like social justice, environmental justice issues. And then I really came to appreciate that like the difference maker is policy, like the intersection of your everyday life and how you experience it as a person in this world. The link in between is policy. And so I always think it's funny when people say like they're not so political, because it's like you're political whether you like it or not. The only difference is whether you participate or not, right? But politics is happening to you whether you choose it or not. You don't have
facts.
a choice, you know? And like you
Yes.
just look around and you are living a political life, period. And so for me, it was just really appreciating that I guess some people will buy into the idea that like some people have to win, have to lose. Okay. The reason our communities are always losing is because of the representation that we get and the fight that you're willing to put up
Hmm.
and the difference that you get and what those fights look like and who values who. And all of those things are connected to like who's willing to stand up and make noise, who's willing to stand up and put it on the line. And that slow drip, watching that slow drip of neglect for our community is what for me, I was like, we're getting in.
Love it. So what was your first time? What was your first public office?
Assembly. This is my first. I've
Wow.
been an assembly member for the last 5 years. And it's
So that your
been
first
quite a ride.
campaign and you won your first campaign.
No, 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 no. This is my first
Oh,
time being in office, but
gotcha.
I actually ran in 2016 for the first time ever, but I didn't get all the way through to election. My lawyer made a mistake and we got thrown off the ballot. So that was heartbreaking. I was 25. And then in 2018, I ran against a woman who had been in office almost as long as I had been alive at that point. And I had spent
Wow.
some years working for the congressman of the area and Jose Serrano at the time. And I just knew that, like, okay, I want to get into this. And I think, there could be stronger representation. So I jumped in and I lost. And it was devastating. But 2 years later, we went up for a rematch and we got it done. And for the last 5 years, it's been like the privilege of my life to be able to represent my home, the community that I grew up in, on the state level. I've got to tell you, like, not that you can, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? There's really politics can't solve all your problems. And for the problems that we can solve, it doesn't happen overnight. These institutions are like built to move slow. But I am really proud of the progress we've been able to make. And I do look forward to what's to come in the years to come. And I'm excited to kind of take those talents to Miami, but really just take them to DC.
Well, look, I mean, I think what you talked about the slow drift of poor representation, but what we're undergoing right now is a fire hose of an attack from the highest levels of our government. And Trump has focused his crosshairs on our communities, Bronx included. And we heard the governor talk about some of the protections and some of the ways that she wants the state to help protect vulnerable communities, talking about being protected in schools and at the hospital. So is she doing enough to protect these vulnerable communities? Is there more that needs to be done? Can your district residents feel safe if they have to when they go to church or when they go to school or when they go to the hospital?
Look, I mean, I think, we can have a whole conversation about like the different shades of Democrat. And I think that it's certainly a place to start. I think giving people the right to be able to sue ICE officers when they have their rights violated is important. And I think marking sensitive locations as places that are off limits will be important and help people feel safer doing these things. But I think there's also some other really great policy that we want to still keep pushing for. One of them is the New York for All Act, which is something that I've been a really big advocate of. And that would make it so that local police departments cannot coordinate with ICE at all. And what does that mean? Because right now it's in practice. So, like when you go upstate, there's a 287G program, which is a program that local police departments opt into, and they get to work with ICE and they get money from ICE, and they basically act as like an extension for ICE. What does that mean? You get pulled over by a police department that's working with ICE, they can call ICE and be like, "Hey, we got him. Come get him." And they can hold you until ICE comes and gets you. That is horrible. And most importantly, we shouldn't be using our tax dollars like that. ICE has all the money in the world that they need. We don't have to be using New York dollars, New York time, New York resources, especially when I think about police and their actual job to keep us safe. Yet we have, a record high of murders that go unsolved. We have all of these other issues related to crime and policing that we need to solve. We don't need our police distracted doing the federal government's work. The federal government wants to run a cruelty machine focused on ripping families apart. That's on them. We certainly don't need to be using our resources to help them. And so that's one example of a bill that I think goes far and needs to. Because another sort of way, it's not even just like that example of, you get stopped by the cop. It could be the case that, and I've heard this before actually, that, when police do checkpoints on a Saturday night, you don't want drunk drivers out, etc. Those checkpoints have also turned into immigration checkpoints. What is that?
Wow.
What is that? What are we doing? Right? Why are we allowing our police to do that? We have the power to say, you can't do that here. And so we should be. So New York for All is certainly one. And I think, New York has always been a leader. We do a lot. We pass a lot of first in the nation legislation that other states then follow. I think a really important one is I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's the right to representation and supporting immigrants who go into federal court with legal representation, recognizing the fact that every time you go into court without a lawyer, it's why we have the fundamental right that everyone has a right to representation. When you go into court without a lawyer, you are significantly more vulnerable. And we even see it, for example, where kids, right? We've seen the federal government say a 4-year-old can go into court without a lawyer and they can defend themselves. And of course, what happens? They get deported every time. And so also New York using its resources to support our immigrant communities that, by the way, pays taxes and contributes to this economy and is just as part of New York as we are, those of us who have citizenship. That, I think, is also a really important program in this moment to say, here's how we're going to show up when we know the federal government, like you said, is hell-bent on attacking our communities directly with all of the force that they have.
Yeah, thank you for that answer because I'm personally speaking here, I'm just so fed up with and heartbroken from what I'm seeing from our federal government and from ICE. I think it's a complete insult to Americans, like, and not even just undocumented immigrants but to Americans. We're just like seeing our rights being eroded
Right.
before our eyes. And if we don't stand up to what's going on now, it's going to be very, very ugly. So thank you for that answer.
No, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Led, I think now it's time to take a short pause so that we can pay some of the bills. We are lucky to have a great sponsor, 181 Cabrini. It's our neighborhood bistro. Both Led and I are just steps away from 181 Cabrini, and we love it. 181 Cabrini is located right there on that corner of 181 and Cabrini, just steps away.
181 and Cabrini.
Just steps away from the bridge. So, yeah, I love it. Led, you and I were there the other night.
Yeah, and we also met there for the first time. You and I, the first time we met, we had like lunch there, and it's my local bar now. Like since you and I both live like right around. It's my local bar. I spend a lot of time there. James Lee, the owner, is just an incredible restaurateur. Right, I think he's a great guy. He's super funny, but like the food is on point. So please hit up 181 Cabrini. It is really one of my favorite spots. 181 Cabrini, pull up. That's my spot.
going back to what you said, and it feels like it's a second end of Reconstruction, right? It feels like we've been making this progress from the 60s to now, and then we're being pushed back, but like going decades back. It really does feel like it's a second nadir, like we're going back. Um, how do you challenge that at the level you're at now, and as hopefully as a congressman? How do you challenge this just bigger than just like we're going back? How do you
Yeah.
challenge that, and what is your take on it?
Well, I think my take is that I 100% agree. I think people are trying to turn the clock back on us. And I think a couple of things have happened. One, the opposition has been very, very, very skilled at dividing us and making people feel like, well, I'm not an immigrant. I don't have a problem. Everybody in my family has papers. I don't have a problem. And I think what the very tragic sort of outcome of Renee Good's death, that woman who was murdered by ICE the other day, is that people have seen like, look, you are fair game, period. If you believe in resisting this administration's violence, you are fair game. And that is bone chilling. It is scary to think that that's the country we live in, right? Because that's the kind of thing that happens in governments that feel very far away, right? Like, certainly could never happen here, but that's our reality now. And I think people are starting to wake up and appreciate that. But the opposition has been very good at making it feel like ISIS terrorism is somebody else's problem, some other community's issue, some criminal's problem, and demonizing the people that they go after, not and making it so that by the time it's your turn, it's too late. You don't even realize that they've come for you. I think that fighting against that and like reminding everyone that like we are in this fight together and not in some like altruistic cliche kind of way. We are in this fight together because we will be in the meat grinder together, period.
Mm.
And that's, I think, certainly true for like communities of color, but it's also true as New Yorkers, right? Like New York and California are the two states that we are the resistance, right? We fund out of state abortions when the federal government says you can't get them. We support voter registration efforts in other places. We make sure that we're fighting for democracy at every turn. And so, what does that mean? We're public enemy number one, number one. And so, there was recently just something in the news about how the federal government would be cutting $10 billion worth of childcare assistance to New York. So that doesn't mean that doesn't exempt anyone, right? That's all of us that are going to feel that pain. And so I think they've been really great at dividing us, and we have to hold on to unity as much as possible. But I think the other thing is that as a party and as people, we also have to start playing offense. There
So
is
true.
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't understand how it is. About 10 years ago, I was working for still the congressman at the time. And maybe 12 years ago, immigration reform felt this close to happening with a pathway to citizenship and like getting people out of the shadows, getting them on to a path where everything would be resolved. Now we don't even talk about a pathway to citizenship. Now we're just begging for people to not be ripped out of their families and thrown on a plane to God knows where. That's unacceptable. And like, as the party that is meant to represent these communities and represent immigrants, I think we have to start playing offense and saying, hey, I'm not going to let you do that. And here's the vision for what I think should happen. And I think that is also something that will inspire people to want to support people who are standing for something, because it's just not inspiring to say, vote for me, I'm better than that guy. Vote
Yeah.
for me, at least I'm not terrible. It's not really inspiring to anybody, right? Like, doesn't really make anybody want to vote for you. And I get it, right? And so I'm I'm also hopeful that we will have more people stepping up to say, here's the affirmative vision that we have, and here's the future that we should be charting for our community.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I thank you. And just to follow up on that, we talk a lot about MAGA Latinos on this show. And I remember when Led and I started doing this in May, I was very upset with MAGA Latinos, but I would always push back on the idea that we should sort of like excommunicate MAGA Latinos from the Latino family. And little by little in our arguments, me and Led arguing, I've been feeling more and more and more upset, and also more and more reluctant to engage with a MAGA person, and particularly a MAGA Latino person. But do you have thoughts on that? On how do we handle this this awful thing that's happened, where so many Latinos seem to have found solace in the messaging from the MAGA party?
Yeah. No, wait, but I want to make sure I have it straight. So you're saying don't excommunicate. Led, you're saying get rid?
I'm just saying, yeah, like close ranks. I don't want to talk to you. If you want to come back, you come back. But I'm no longer trying to win you over because I think you're part of the cult. And to me, it's even more disgusting that you're a person of color, a Latino, and you're shitting on other Latinos. So I'm just like, forget them. I don't want nothing to do.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. That's fascinating. That's fascinating because I feel like also to be Latino means like I got a couple family members that I'm like, what are you doing? Right? Like we just make sure we never even go near politics because I'm just like, we're not doing it. So I'm of the mind of like, it's my responsibility to win you back. And maybe that's because I'm an elected official, right? And I can recognize the ways in which our party has not done for Latinos. Here, I agree with you that, like, it's crazy that just because you're upset, you went there. It's like, "Oh, te pasaste," right? Like, there's a
Pasaste.
million other things you
Te
could have done
pasaste.
that te pasaste. Yeah, you didn't have to go all the way there. But I think, that the mayoral election that we just saw was the proof that I needed to know that when we meaningfully invest in the Latino community in terms of communication, in terms of outreach, we will get our people to where they need to go. So I was the person Zoran is a friend and Zoran Mamdani is a friend. And I was like, yo, you got to do a video in Spanish. Like, and he's like, but I don't speak Spanish. I'm like, don't worry. I will work with you. I'm gonna spend 5
I
hours
saw that
there.
video.
Like,
That was really cool. That video was really
Okay.
That was
cool. I
very
liked
good.
it.
yeah. So, but
Yeah,
the
me
first
too. I
one we
liked it.
did, thank you. But the first one we did, I was like just kind of behind the scenes in that one. That was his first video. And he, now he's like a fucking mega celeb. Excuse my cursing. He's a mega celeb. My bad.
It's
He's
my
a mega
fault.
celeb and like thanks. But so like all of his videos get millions of views, but his first video to get more than 1 million views was that first Spanish video we did. And right. Like, what a fun fact, right? And to me, that is fascinating because it showed the thirst for engagement that our community feels, right? Like, and it's not just, it was speaking to his agenda, right? Which is certainly an agenda for Latinos because those are all issues that Latinos are facing in New York City. But it was in a way that spoke directly to Latinos. And that was impactful. So then the second video, again, we like that one we had a little fun with it and I sort of came from behind the camera, but there was again that overwhelming excitement about his meaningful engagement. And then what happens? He wins Latinos. He wins the majority of Latinos. That matters, right? And to me, that was the proof in the pudding. And he started his campaign by talking to voters who voted for Trump, Democrats who voted for Trump. And now what do we have? We have a whole band of Latinos, especially, but voters who went from Trump to Mamdani, right? There's something to be said there about direct engagement, about authenticity. And I'm not saying that Trump has authenticity, but I'm saying he plays it very well. And if we can actually show up genuinely authentic, genuinely talking to people about the things that they care about, then I think that's how you win them back. And so I'm not quite ready to wash my hands yet because look, if you also never spoke about anything I care about and you never did for me, and every time you were in power, you never delivered, I might be over you too. I might be like, you know what? You guys are all full of crap and I am going to give the other guy another chance. And I think that's sort of what our community is caught in right now, or at least that's what I hope.
Yeah, and I mean, like I want to say that what I mean is those are the casual voters, right? I'm talking about the diehard Latino MAGA, right? Like you just spit venom and all your talking points. Those people I'm done with because they're so far gone. And you're right. We need to make that argument. And Zoran made it well. Like I know her, my mom. Yo voy a votar para el But again, he made it palatable, right? And so those are not the people I'm talking about. I'm talking about the diehard MAGA, those people I'm done with.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to policy. And, one of my biggest issues for me, right? Because I grew up in Washington Heights. I came of age in, the late 80s with crack, right? I saw how my neighborhood went from like a tough neighborhood, but then a war zone with crack, right? And I feel like with heroin, we're back there again. And while I do believe in some harm reduction, I think safe injection sites are a real problem. There's only 2 in the country, and the 2 are in Washington Heights and El Barrio, right? 2 are the only places in Manhattan where people of color have anything. De Blasio passed it on the last day of his administration at midnight without any public accountability, no community input. To me, that feels like it's a Trojan horse for gentrification, right? And I feel like I've seen, like, for a time, it feel like Uptown was just going up. And then since like 2018, since like it's just been going down, and I'm seeing things that I've never seen before in my neighborhood. And I know it's the same way in the Bronx. I want to know what your take is and your ideas on harm reduction and how you could make some things better on that.
Wait, but I know I'm the interview here, but I want to understand the Trojan horse for gentrification. How do you think it leads to gentrification?
Well, but basically what it does is, first of all, there's heroin everywhere around in New York City, right? But you only put these places here. So it becomes a magnet, right, for drug addicts to come here, right? And basically the problem is my mom. My mom has been living in the same apartment since 1979. She pays about $600, right? So the point is to get rid of her. And once they get rid of her and her people, then they get rid of the harm reduction sites, and then they bring other new people. That's my theory.
I got you. That's interesting. I've never heard that take before, but it's a very interesting one. Okay, so I represent the hub, right? The other spot in the city that deals with this. And this is an issue that is really tricky. So I've fought against overdose prevention centers in our community because I think we're just not ready for them. And I think, look, if you want to tell me you're going to put an overdose prevention center somewhere in Utica, great. Love that. Fantastic. Go ahead and try it out. We're not ready for it because of everything else we're dealing with, right? So the reason that the hub and that East Harlem look the way that they do, it's because we have a super, super, super high concentration of the clinics where people can come and get their daily help. And what happens? When there's such a high concentration, you have many people who are suffering with substance abuse in the area. And then you have drug dealers who know they're going to be there, who prey on them, right? Who know they're going to go there for like a daily hit. And so instead of that, you going to that place to get your medication to wean you off, it actually just acts like a daily hit that you're able to get. And then you go outside and you get high again. And then it's just this vicious cycle that repeats itself. And you never get better. And that is something that at its purest is really just an equity issue. And one of the most difficult kinds, because I think this is an issue that brings out like the knee-jerk worst reactions in people, right? That like sort of bring you to that place where you want to be like, just get these people out of here. I don't want to see this. I don't want to, and really makes you like lose sight of people's humanity in a way that is heartbreaking to me because at the end of the day, like, and especially in my district, like these are people's family members. Like I have constituents who have a brother who's out in the street, who they worry about because they haven't seen him around in the last week. And they worry that he might have overdosed somewhere, right? Or somebody was like, yeah, my cousin is out there. And like, we're just hoping he's going to get better one day, right? So like, these are our people. These are our people, right? Whose names we know, whose stories we know, who like, the trauma that led them to that substance abuse. And like, that is so, so, so important for us to keep close. But it's also an equity issue that the city needs to solve. You cannot have, to your point, this issue exists all over New York. You cannot have such a concentration in a neighborhood because of what it does. Now, the fight is that other neighborhoods say, well, we don't want it because we don't want to turn into that. And it's like, well, nobody will turn into that. If we don't put there's 24 within a half-mile radius in my district. If you don't put 24 in one place, you won't have that issue. If you space them out according to population or according to need, you won't have that issue. And so, but that is politically tricky, right? You have to have the courage to do that politically. Albany has told us that it has to be the city because it's a zoning matter, and we don't intercede so locally on zoning issues. And I'm hopeful that this administration that I know is genuinely committed to equity and to doing things the right way will take this on and have the hard conversations in those other communities and say you're going to get one overdose prevention, not one overdose prevention center, you're going to get one clinic and we're all going to share the burden. And then I think we can start to maybe move into conversations about overdose prevention centers because I think the overdose prevention centers as a concept are powerful and I know that they can be helpful to people. I know it. they're proven to be, right? But the problem is the siting, right? When you put them in the same area where people are struggling, where drug dealers are preying on them, where community is fed up, then what you have is an issue where people are just like, you know what? I don't want any of this. Get it all out. And so it's something that I believe in concept. It's something that I've resisted in policy right now in practice. And I think it's something that down the line we can entertain. But right now, we do need to sort of ring the bell on the equity issue that it is.
Yeah, and just to you go back a little what you said, like Octavio lives like right down the block from me, right? So
Mhm.
we live in the 1As. We're in the zone of the safe injection site. So it's like, you know, it's turned this into a corridor now, right? And like you said, all these dudes are something. They say, hey, yo, I got a market. Let me sell
Yep.
heroin. You know
Yep.
what I mean? And so up and down this block from all the way from Amsterdam all the way to Pinehurst, it's just nothing but drugs. And a lot of times, you know, white folks come from other places, right? And they feel safer west of Broadway, so they hang out here. And again, it's blight, right? And the stuff that
Mhm.
even though we never, so I'll see every morning on my corner, there's a drug addict that goes like this to the garbage, right? And every day, and it's like I get it, but it feels like those approaches are
Yeah.
addict centric approaches instead of community centric approaches. So it's like
Sure.
my children have to see this, my
Yep.
children have to do with this, and I just feel it's super unfair.
No, I agree with you 100%. And that's really great phrasing, like community-centric approach. I think is certainly something that needs to be prioritized more. And I really I believe like the way I believe my name is Amanda, I believe that if we had a more equitable distribution, we would not have these issues. But yeah,
Thank you.
it's an equity issue at its core.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. I think me and Led we diverge a little bit on the issue sometimes, but I've also found myself moving closer to Led's point of view. I certainly do believe that this needs to be much more of a community centric focus. I mean, it could be something as, you know, I don't know. I mean, I think that some of these places get state funding. Like, for example, the one that's closest to us, you know, it's funded only from 9 to 5. At 5 o'clock, it shuts down, and all the people who need the services are then basically left to their own devices, and they end up in the subways or they end up on the sidewalks, and that's not appropriate either. So like there really needs to be some more focus, some more the issue that we've had a little bit, not a little bit, the issue that we've had here, which Led alluded to, is that this was done in the middle of the night without
Yeah.
community input, and it was an experiment. But now the experiment has run for a few years, and we've seen that maybe on the addict centric approach that it's working to prevent overdoses, but on the community centric approach it's a complete failure because
I
these are not the equity issue is being ignored, and our communities are paying the price and feeling the brunt. And you know, heroin and drugs and all that, it all intersects with things like homelessness and
yeah.
people, unable to afford their housing. I know that in the Bronx, housing is a tremendously huge issue, and that there's been a lot of housing that has been built in the Bronx. You can see it from the Cross Bronx, a lot of big buildings. And I wonder though, you know, is that the right kind of housing? Has there been enough housing? What's the situation on housing, and what's the way forward there?
Yeah. No is the answer. Not enough, not the right kind, not enough of the right kind. I think people say the phrase affordable housing and then right after, like, affordable for who? And that's a really fair question. And we see here and there glimmers of hope. I don't know if you guys remember Spofford. I grew up, okay, yeah, I grew up literally, you're muted, Led, but I grew up literally around the block from Spofford,
Yeah, I remember
around the corner. Like,
Spofford. Yeah.
I grew up on Benita between Randall and Spofford, and Spofford, like the jail was right down the block. And so Spofford, obviously, a place of like a history of pain and horrors for our community. When they closed it, they decommissioned it, et cetera, et cetera. Today, when you go to where Spofford was, it's a site of incredibly beautiful housing that was developed by a community organization in collaboration with a local developer.
Did
And
not know that. It's amazing.
you should go. It's beautiful. And they have apartments there that are actually affordable. Apartments cost, some of them cost five, $600. So made for people who live in our community right now and like at price points that people in our community can afford right now. And that is like, obviously, I'm biased as a Hunts Point girl. I'm going to love Hunts Point all day, but it is one of, I tell people all the time openly, it is one of my favorite projects and my favorite examples of like what success can look like when we decide to invest in a nonprofit developer and a nonprofit partner who are not in it for the money, but are in it to solve the problem. And so that I think is the model that we need to focus on. We treat housing like a commodity where people can make money and fine, great. But we have to regulate it accordingly. And I think just like we regulate anything else, we regulate alcohol to death and cigarettes and all these things. But housing is the place where we get a little more nervous. And really, it's because there's so much money involved. And that's another place where the federal government has tremendous power, the affordability rates. So, when you see those apartments, like affordable apartments being built, and they have like the range of like, oh, you got to make between this much and this much. And you're like, who the hell makes that much here? That those rates, those are set by the federal government. That's an AMI formula, a area median income. And that formula basically takes into account the entire New York City and metro area. So we get lumped in with places like Westchester that have a high concentration of wealth, and Manhattan, believe it or not, huge concentration of wealth that kind of throws off our balance. So on paper, it looks like the average is higher than it is. And it doesn't account for the fact that in communities like the Bronx, there are people who are very, very poor. And I tell people that this is the classic example of like averages hiding inequities, right? Like because it says like, oh yeah, here's
Deep.
the average. But
Yep.
it's so true. And you see it here in housing, because it's like, oh yeah, everybody makes about this much. And you're like, where the hell is that? And you see it also in crime, right? Where you hear crime is going down, but you're like, there's a shooting every day on my block. What do you mean? Averages hiding those inequities. And communities like ours lose when you use those as a standard, right? And so area median income is one where the federal government has, and this was more than a decade ago, they experimented with very local AMI, as local as a zip code. They were doing it out in Texas. Nothing ever happened here in New York because there just wasn't the advocacy for it. And so that's another place where the federal government, there's tremendous power to really solve some of these bigger issues. And one of the reasons I hope to get to Congress.
Wow. Yeah.
Average hiding inequity should be the name of this episode, right? It is
Yeah.
so brilliant. I mean, this has
Thank
been
you.
such an illuminating conversation. Seriously, like
Thank you.
you're brilliant. And
Thank you.
no, I'm serious because it's the way you explain things, right? Like you
Yeah.
could tell you thought them through, and I really, really do appreciate that.
Thank you.
And you're so right? Like the averages really do hide a lot of stuff, right? Because I've seen it. Like you need to make 180,000. Who makes 180,000? Like that's not an
Right.
average here, right?
Right. Right.
And that's fascinating. So Octavio's the producer, so you need to make that the that needs to be the title. This is amazing. But going
I'll
back
take it into
to
consideration.
yeah. Going back to working with Mamdani, you know what I mean. The fact that you guys you know him very well. How do you foresee while you're still in the assembly working with him and the mayor? The governor working with him. I think I've heard that this is like a golden age for the city council. So I think we really can do a lot of things in New York government. I think we could be a beacon and an alternative to what's happening federally. And I just want to hear what your take is on that.
Yeah, I'm actually so excited, not just because he's a friend, but because I know him as a colleague and how he works and how he shows up for people. And I think it's so refreshing. I think also like coming off of Eric Adams' mayoralty, like a mayor who was just like there were so many times where it's like, yo, putting all your BS aside, I already cursed once, so I'm
I
not gonna curse
know.
again, but, like, putting all your BS aside, like, forget all of that. There were just so many moments where it's like, "Wow, I just wish you would show up as the mayor in this moment," right? Like, forget all
Yeah.
the other stuff, forget the indictments, forget all those things. I just wish you would show up as the mayor right now and say
Yeah.
the correct thing and do the correct thing and lead in the correct way, and it is so refreshing to have Zoran not only be someone who's an immigrant and identifies directly with the immigrant experience, but who is unabashed, unapologetic about being like, "No, we ain't doing that here." No, we ain't doing that here. And just even the other day, being unequivocal about the fact he was like, NYPD will not be collaborating with ICE, period. No fumbling, no like, well, we got to see. No, no, it was like, we won't be doing that, period. And I think that kind of leadership has been invigorating for the whole party. And some people don't like it, right? Because again, we could have a whole conversation about the different shades of Democrat.
We
Some people don't
should.
like that.
You should come back and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I would love that because that's a whole other conversation, right? But so there are some people who don't like that, but I think that that is the energy that our party has been missing, and that inspires the average person to show up. That's why you saw record-setting voter numbers in that election, right? And so I think coming off of that, it's been energizing for the party, energizing for people, and I think energizing for us as colleagues to say, okay, great. We have a partner, somebody who's willing to push as hard as we do. I think his relationship with the governor is great right now, and it's showing to be great, and it'll be a great working relationship. Though I do anticipate that there will be times where like nobody ever agrees 1,000% of the time, right? Nobody. And that I think will be the true test of how we can come together as Democrats to push forward for the better of the community. But it'll also be a true test of like who's willing to fight for what. We are just in a time where you gotta be willing to fight for your people. And how you define who your people are is up to you. Whether those people are big donors or whether those are people who vote for you is up to you. But how you fight and who your people are, um, I think is going to be a really important question in these coming years.
Are you willing to make an endorsement for a governor yet, or no? Are you planning to make one?
You know, this is the first time I got asked that question. I don't know. Actually, no one's asked me. I don't know. I haven't thought about it. I'm like laser focused on my race right now, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
It'll be a long 6 months for sure.
And I want to say, Amanda, like, just from this conversation, I'm blown away. You have my vote already, right? But make the pitch. Why should the average person vote for you? Tell the average person how they can find out more, how they can get
Yeah.
involved. Give them the socials. Let us know.
Yeah. So look, like I said, I was born and raised in the Bronx. I am so proud of the community that I come from, but I also can recognize that in this time, we need more. And to get more, we're going to have to fight for it. Now more than ever, it is clear that standing up to fight is the only thing that's going to get us through these dark times. And the Bronx that I know is a community that's made up of neighbors who fight for each other, who support each other in every way they can, who find ways to give and be supportive, even when they don't have enough themselves. That is the Bronx that I love. That's the Bronx that I'm proud of. And that's the Bronx that I want to keep fighting for, to make sure that when we're talking about the Bronx in 50 years, it's a story of how we turned this community around, how we made sure that people here got the opportunities that they needed, how they were not displaced, how this is a community that was able to stay firm and stay rooted and still grow. That is the Bronx's future that I'm fighting for. And if that's a message that resonates with a voter, then I hope that they will join our campaign. A way to get involved is to check out amandaseptimo.com, where you can sign up to donate, to volunteer, to come, to call neighbors, to knock doors, to do anything that you feel comfortable with so that we can get this message out as far as we can. I'm also Amanda Septimo on all platforms, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. And I look forward to having as many conversations as I can in these 6 months, because the only thing that has ever moved the Bronx forward is Bronx people who care about it. And we need to do the same now.
What's the social media again?
Amanda Septimo on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. You can find me at Amanda Septimo, and we're at amandaseptimo.com. It's a great thing about having a unique name.
That's right. I love it. And again, like the Bronx, New York, this country needs more fighters, and I really appreciate that fighting spirit. But also, you'll be making history as the first Dominican woman to be a congressperson, right? That's a big deal. So I think that's another thing to aspire to. So
No,
I wish you the
100%.
best.
Thank you.
Octavio and here are here for the discussion. We do lives every Sunday. You ever want to jump on the
Awesome.
live, you let us know.
I
We'll make it happen.
Yeah.
Because
I'll check you out
it's
this Sunday.
it's about pushing us forward, and I really feel like you have our best interests in mind. So thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I also wanted to just say, I'm very impressed by your resiliency and your tenaciousness, your ability to bounce back from your early days when you had issues, you had a loss, and you bounced back and you continued to push forward. I think that's the fighting spirit that you're talking about. I can see that, and your intelligence certainly comes through. And I'm really appreciative that you came here. And we wish you the best of luck, and we hope that you'll come back at some point So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so
No,
much. Good
thank
luck.
you.
Oh, and
Thank you for
wait,
having
and
me.
I wanted to say this. This is one of the things that I want to say. We're Uptown Voices, right? But Uptown Voices includes the South Bronx. That's like
Mhm.
Right.
that's also Uptown. In our view,
It's part of Greater
Amen.
Uptown. It's part of
Yeah.
Greater
it's Greater
Uptown. That's
Uptown.
right. Yep.
So like that's why it's so important to have folks like you. And also like I want to make sure that we're Uptown Voices. So people sometimes might wonder like, well, okay, well, because we talk about a lot of stuff. We talk about Israel, we talk about Venezuela, we talk about these international issues. We're bringing it from our perspective as Uptowners, as New
Yeah.
Yorkers. They're well within our realm to talk about. So, you know, we certainly do focus on the local issues,
Yeah.
but we're not afraid of discussing the greater issues. So thank you again, and we look
Thank
forward to
Thank
you.
talking
you.
to you again.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the work you do to platform our communities and the issues. We need more of this, and I'm really grateful to be here. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us in this episode of Uptown Voices, brought to you by 181 Cabrini, your neighborhood bistro just steps away from the North Walk of the George Washington Bridge. Use the code Uptown Voices Season 1 for your discount. And to stay up to date on the latest in Uptown, you can follow Uptown Collective on Instagram, Facebook, and X. If you're watching Uptown Voices on YouTube, don't forget to smash the subscribe button and to give us a like. And don't forget, we also need financial contributions from listeners like you to produce, improve, and expand our content. To contribute, please scan the QR code on the screen. Until next time, this has been Uptown Voices.